Okay, so we're organizing into, I think, 5 groups, and you're 2 groups at one table. It's very friendly. They just want to stay together, so it's fine. Perfect. Okay, it's almost time to wrap up our discussions. I hope you've had a chance to discuss these questions and to even appoint a spokesperson for your table who can report out. I'm going to call upon you to do that in just a second. What I'd also like to do is share with you some of the results from the survey that you all took. Thank you very much. From earlier today. We can actually share with you some of this as part of a discussion starter. So if you can start to wind up, we're going to have a chance to share what views you've expressed at the table in the next 20 to 30 minutes, and we'll try to capture those views as best we can. But let's have a look as well at the answers you gave earlier on these related questions about how are things placed for the banking sector? What issues do you see, or what issues do you face? And I guess, where are we starting from? This question of where are we on the journey towards a really robust and mature energy efficiency financing sector. So the first question was about whether you actually have lending programs for energy efficiency in your institution. So I guess I'm wondering whether maybe you have actually done energy efficiency lending before, but whether there's a dedicated program. So exactly 50% said yes, you have a well-developed program on this. 18% said yes, but it's in an early stage, and 32% said no. So it's certainly not everybody that has energy efficiency lending. Many of you have come to learn. I hope you've learned some good materials here about the issues and the possibilities and opportunities. 50% have well-developed programs. That's very encouraging as well. I guess we could take longer to tease out who that is and what sort of programs there are, but I'm interested to see that. The second question, if we can scroll down, what do you see as the major barrier to more energy efficiency lending? In fact, the most there says, well, it's on both sides of the equation. One is the lack of viable or bankable project proposals put forward. At the same time, a lack of internal awareness about the opportunities. So those were the highest listed barriers. It's a barrier for internal awareness, but also a barrier for what you're expecting of borrowers. So that's interesting in itself. The lowest ranked one there is about poor returns. I think that was there as a reminder that energy efficiency lending and energy efficiency IRRs and so on can be actually quite high. That's not the problem. It's not a problem that these asset investments can generate positive returns. The problem is in structuring and being able to capture and securitize project cash flows. And I will come back to the question that Tom Dreesen had a minute ago to Alex about how to do that, because I think that's fundamental here about de-risking. Let's have a look at the next question. What area is your organization most interested in developing for future energy efficiency lending? 68% said lending for industrial energy efficiency upgrade. That's pretty interesting. We also asked the question about commercial buildings, very small percentage, residential 9%. So nearly 70% said industry. Of course, that's a big part of the opportunity, and a big part of the potential is in having more efficient industry. But I would also remind you all that some of the big opportunities here are in cooling, which is in commercial and residential buildings. And there's also transport, which Alex mentioned also, that doesn't really get thought about. That wasn't on the list, but it's something to consider. And the green category there is lending on a portfolio then project basis by intermediaries such as ESCOs. I'm not sure maybe everyone knew what that meant, but 18% said that is of interest as well. But there's an interesting result there about the need to prioritize and work with banks who have appetite for industry and lending to industry and the sorts of mechanisms and techniques that would require. Last question, if we scroll down. In your opinion, what will be the most effective by way of support to help accelerate energy efficiency lending? We have a tie between more supportive government policy and project de-risking instruments. I would argue that there's quite supportive government policy in the Philippines right now. You have a new act, government is working out how to implement. It's clearly a priority. This is a better set of conditions than we see in a lot of places. So you do have supportive policy. Enforcement can be an issue for policy, and making sure that it, we're talking before about level 1, level 2 audits, moving to the need for this kind of understanding in the market. But whether that can be enforced, the policy intention is good, but whether it can be enforced can be a problem. To a lesser degree, education and skills programs for banks and project developers. And the smallest one there is concessional finance. Interesting. Most people usually say we need more money, give us grants, give us concessional finance. So these are interesting results. I thought I'd put them up there as a way of getting you thinking, seeing what people are saying as we start to think about these questions of what is holding the financial sector back in the Philippines from more energy efficiency lending. So let's now go to our tables and hear the answers that you came up with to the 3 questions that we posed. I'm going to come to this table first because they happen to be right in front of me, and see if we can find a spokesperson to ask what you discussed, and maybe just take 2 minutes to tell us any answers you had to those questions. And now people are running away because they don't want to be spoken about, or they don't want to have to speak. So Colin, I'm looking at you because you look like the most likely person to speak.
Thanks, Mark. With regards to some of the results there, that there wasn't sufficient policy as one of the largest indicators to mobilizing capital. I think the perspective that we have here with these 2 ladies from Veterans Bank and BDO is that the regulation is not coming from the central bank. So yes, there is a lot of policy for energy efficiency from the DOE, but how does that affect the finance sector? And if there's nothing mobilized on the finance sector side, the finance sector feels that they're paralyzed to an extent to address energy efficiency. So maybe it's really about merging the DOE private sector requirements to Banco Central policy and directives to help them bridge that gap. So that's why I think those results came up the way they did.
Okay, that's interesting. In a way, that's a kind of answer to the first question about where is the banking sector in its journey. It's not my phone. I don't know who said it. We said something wrong. The question on where are we on the journey? Interesting to say that we have supportive energy efficiency policy. Do we have supportive banking sector policy? We do, but they're not really linked. I think that's what you're saying, and in fact, that's a challenge across the board. When you think about buildings, well, there's building sector policy, there's building regulations and codes. Do they reinforce the importance of having good energy measures for the energy using components of the building? These pieces and different regulations for different sectors need to actually start talking to each other to achieve these bigger goals. What else did you talk about in relation to the sector or any individual institution sort of problems or holding you back and things that need to be progressed as priority?
Don't think we got that far.
Sure. So I just want to, because we were just bouncing different things in our minds, and one thing we said that there isn't really an incentive right now for the banking industry to take on board these energy efficiency projects. So it just means additional legwork, compliance requirements, and so on. So what would be interesting to kind of, I guess, relate to the banking industry is the rate of return that elsewhere has become possible through energy efficiency. For instance, BDO said we have stopped lending to fossil fuels projects, right? So something's going to have to take their place. What's going to take their place? Could that be energy efficiency space? And could those rates of return be attractive to the banks? So then we really a little bit talked about that ESG circular that is forthcoming, that was mentioned by the assistant governor. And we sort of, at least we were kind of chatting here that maybe that's a sort of push factor. It provides some incentives, but then maybe carbon pricing could be another as kind of a penalty side thing, as the reporting on the footprints is becoming tighter and tighter. And I guess that's happening. Maybe you can say a few words about how you have seen that.
Yeah, I'm not, well, we do know that President BBM has indicated he would like to engage a carbon price in the market, but we haven't seen what that will entail for the time being. And there will have to be a lot of work in and around that to get it to market. But you know, rightly brought up by Serpa that the carbon price will have an impact on dirty industry. And if you want to become you know, export competitive to European American markets, you have to address this. So
yeah, interesting. I mean, a couple of lots of threads to pick up there around. I mean, you started off talking about rates of return and incentives, and on the other side, sort of compliance and regulation. And these are two sides of the same coin. You know, the carrot and the stick. You know, that we need to think about, and whether we can move the sector away from that more compliance mentality. I heard a comment before saying, well, whatever BSP says by way of regulation, well, then we'll just do it. You know, but there's an opportunity here that you can actually shift away from saying this is just about compliance to actually there's a really profitable portfolio that we can build in this space, an alignment of incentives between different actors, not just banks, but utilities who are mentioned briefly and others who can come together around the opportunities that are there because they are there. Anything else that you want to raise, or does anybody have any thoughts or comments about any of what they've heard from this table? I'll be calling on you all in a minute, but are there other comments that you want to share before we move on? That's a no, thank you. Very quickly, one more.
sure. Just the, you know, the level 2 energy audits are required by the DOE moving forward. And if you can create a level of securitization from those level 2 energy audits, that then the banking sector can actually take in as a de-risking mechanism to identify potential savings from an investment. There's a bit of a gap there again, that information is valuable. It can be used by the banking sector, and there should be maybe a directive to push that as legitimate documentation.
Yeah, so better information about projects and the risk of projects and de-risking mechanisms, which came up as obviously people have got that message. It's important to have a good sense of what risks are being taken, and there's tools and mechanisms to help with that. I'm hovering on this table here to see who will be the spokesperson for this group. So please share with us how you discussed these questions. You can share, I don't mind who speaks. But the 3 questions on the sector, maybe what you're finding internally within your organization and what you would most like to see change to progress. Go ahead.
All right. So we're mostly bankers. We're actually bankers here in this table. So we'll go with the first question. We're in kind of different stages.
Can you put it a little bit closer?
Sorry, we're kind of in different stages. That for a branch of a foreign bank has more advanced in terms of the journey as mandated by the foreign bank, which is started earlier on. But most of the local banks in this table are already have something in place, have already started something in place, have already put caps also in terms of their appetite. But compared to the journey of that, the branch of a foreign entity, it's a bit, we're in a bit, I would say, I don't think nascent stage, no? So we're just on the uptick.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it sounds like it would be valuable then to share more experiences between different
Right.
banks. If maybe this is being pushed harder from other
Right.
countries which have put in place earlier
Right.
requirements, so that's pushing down through
Right.
the local activities. So I wonder whether through the Bankers Association, for example, there could be more information sharing about this, or something that would be valuable. That sounds like a good idea.
Right.
Great, thank you. Other comments about individual sort of institutional constraints, or any other comments you want to share on you know, what would help to move things along and accelerate progress?
All right. So I'll just go through the challenges faced by the institutions. Now, it would typically be technical and capacity building. And I think it was mentioned earlier on, even incentives that could be provided to be able to push this forward. And then I think we've answered both already, 2 and 3. It would
Can
be
you just be a little bit clearer on when you say
capacity building.
capacity building?
All right.
What is the capacity that's lacking? And so what would be
So-
helpful?
Okay, so and that would be internal education, in terms of pushing it, if you'd want to get into the, energy efficient space, or even, it has to be drilled down from the basics, what it is, what is the contribution, what is its benefit, why do we need it, to be able to push it towards, an awareness, also even to take it forward to the business. And then capacity, well, that typically is your technical know-how and your capacity building all in one.
I'm going to ask you again. It's really interesting what you're saying. So technical capacity building has today been useful in terms of understanding the broad issues of energy efficiency. But if you're talking of training, who would be the target of that training? Is it the credit officers? Is it the risk department? What sort of training exactly, and how much detail would you need to unblock and get the awareness up so that you could actually see there being programs developed? So the more specific you can be, the better in terms of who needs to know this and what do they need to know. So I don't know if others want to contribute to that or others from other tables, but go ahead.
Okay. Also, to me, it would be top down. To me, it would be top down. It
Okay,
would
so
be
understanding it, management
correct.
of this.
Correct.
then
Because you
we'll
set
flow.
the philosophy and the culture and then bring it down. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Maybe I know these guys said they had two different discussions. Looks like one table to me, but they had a separate discussion here. So please tell us what you shared.
Hello. So for our group, from our discussions and the awareness of the industry currently, so we thought the awareness on EE specifically is not as developed as we hoped it would be. So when we think of ESG, as earlier said, it's more on RE rather than EE. The top of mind idea is more on RE. So that's where we're at currently. So we see some lack of awareness on EE specifically. For number two, what are the challenges? So we want to see more push. So externally, maybe from regulators and the policymakers, and internally within our institutions, maybe some push from top management, going down to our risk officers and those who will implement the projects in it. What capacity? So we want to see more awareness initiatives such as this seminar, and maybe initiative from top tier sponsors or corporates that may deregulate the risks if we were to deal with the smaller MSMEs that have smaller access to capital.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. I want to ask you a little bit closer. Sorry to make you, you don't have to sweat. It's not like a very high pressure situation, and others can contribute on this. I'm really interested in your comment that we need awareness, right? So things like today, it's good to have a chance to think about these things. You need a top-down understanding and awareness there that they can start to make policies. I want to ask you, and maybe it's a question for all of you to think about, what is the most convincing argument you've heard on energy efficiency that makes you think, because when you say we need awareness raising, that means we assume we'll tell people about this, they'll say, oh, it's a good idea, now I'm going to do something. What is the information that you are hearing that makes you think that? Because this is the message that we have to get right and carry forward to senior levels. Can you answer that? What is the thing that's most compelling about energy efficiency? So you would focus on this instead of focusing on other opportunities?
Maybe more on the cost perspective, the savings perspective. So that's been tackled a lot earlier. Looking at how EE can promote savings to the implementers of the projects that implement EE.
Yeah, we've talked about incentives and the fact there is positive returns here, maybe even more positive returns than other projects, right? Does anybody else have any feelings about that? What is the convincing thing that banks need to learn or need to hear so that they will be convinced to do more energy efficiency lending?
So not exactly directed to banks, but I recall a a comment made earlier by Dr. Ashok. He was saying that we are actually all aware about what energy efficiency is. On the household level, it's easy for us to make a decision. Why will I buy that inverter air conditioner? It costs a bit more, but it's going to save me more money in in the next few years, and it's going to pay itself back. But somehow that message gets lost when you think about a bigger scale of, that same concept but on an industrial and facility level. So for me, it's interesting that on the household level, it's easy to understand the economics of energy efficiency, but gets lost somehow on the industrial level. So I guess it's not really an answer to the question, but poses more questions. But
Okay, but I get the impression what you're saying, it's, understanding that opportunity and being able to see it clearly, the rest of the interest will flow in the structures and whether you can pursue it through funds or concessional finance or ESCOs. But first we need to have the awareness that this is a big opportunity and that it makes sense to pursue it. Yeah, I think that's what I'm hearing you say. So thank you. Thanks to the table over there. You deserve a round of applause. And I'm moving now to this table. Sorry, I'm not sure, Gobi, if you were the spokesperson or we have a spokesperson. Okay, our banker colleagues. She's saying no, but she's also laughing, so I don't know. Maybe just you can say a few things of what you discussed and then we can pass to others as well, please.
Yeah, okay. Well, actually, I have nothing more to add to what the bankers table there have said. I'm from a private bank and she's also from another bank. So the challenges are relatively the same: capacity building, just getting enough information, convincing people that it makes sense, it's financially viable. It could be all of that. So there's I think that's one issue. And then somebody earlier also pointed out that a lot of us are in varying stages of our sustainability, and journey. And let's say in our case, we're also just beginning. There's a lot of information education campaigns that need to happen, a lot of understanding. I also echo that part about, having some incentives. At the end of the day, we try to look at what will be, again, I go back to what is viable. And which is why my colleague here earlier pointed out that, it makes sense probably from the engineering, from the technical point of view, but how do we communicate that to make it easy for bankers, financiers to take a look at it and say, okay, yeah, let's take a leap here and then accept the challenge, and then hopefully there will be projects that will make sense, and therefore make it as one of the I suppose good examples. So, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I also want to, I want to come back to Tom's question, which he was asking to Alex, just as we were organizing into the groups here, because I think we should also think in terms of specifics, because I'm getting the impression you're saying if we just raise everybody's awareness and we all agree that it's a good opportunity, then things will happen. But actually there are technical barriers and there are difficulties when it comes to banking standard procedures within your organizations to saying, actually, this doesn't fit with what we're doing. So I'm coming to this table anyway, unless there's other comments from this table, there is, but I want to come back to this question about de-risking, and maybe Alex, you can say a few words in answer to Tom's question if he's still there. But it's an important question anyway. How do we overcome this problem that we have with these sorts of projects that need asset-backed security behind them before we can actually get comfortable with these kinds of risks? John.
Yeah, this might in part go towards that question, but on this table, it was a very interesting discussion around ESG. And one of the comments from the banking side was that there's more focus on the S than the E. And E forms a smaller part, and energy forms a smaller part of the E, and it was generally tending towards renewable energy rather than energy efficiency. But what I found interesting was on the S, there was a focus on growth. So growth, jobs creation, infrastructure, markets. So creating wealth or improving economic efficiency for society as a whole. And what I find interesting is that EE is the role of energy transition that does that. And that's why at ETP, one reason we focus very much on energy efficiency, because it's a key role in the just transition. That is, it creates a lot of jobs, it creates a lot of opportunity. And I wrote this down verbatim: growth, job creation, infrastructure, and that's under S. But this is where the S and the E interact with energy efficiency. So I'm not sure if that's, we promote energy efficiency in such a way, or that isn't the focus, but it definitely falls under S as much as it does the E, and it's worth noting, I think.
Yeah, great point. And those of us who've been promoting energy efficiency for a long time are always looking for ways to promote energy efficiency, because as we know, it doesn't get as much direct coverage as other things. And you used the ESG phraseology, you know, back in when I was working in Copenhagen, in the Copenhagen Center on Energy Efficiency, we, along with the IEA and others, were very involved in a whole lot of work around the multiple benefits of energy efficiency, mapping it to the different sustainable development goals. Yes, energy efficiency creates greenhouse gas emission reductions, which is an E impact, and it takes, but when you look at the other things that it does, it takes pressure off of the need to keep increasing energy supply to meet demand, which in Philippines and in other countries is a huge issue. And that deferred infrastructure spending is a massive economic gain. Right? This is not an environmental issue. This is an economic payoff. There's things around health. If you're looking at things like cooling and having access to cooling, that's about health, and also you know, reduction of air pollution that comes from energy efficiency. This is about you know, that kind of thing in certain places, being able to extend energy use through efficiency to more people is about livelihoods and economic productivity. So it's actually across a broad base of issues, which is exactly what you're saying, that this is not just about the environment. This is about activity that makes good sense on a range of development measures that we care about. So absolutely, couldn't agree more, and could talk longer about that. Sorry.
This doesn't directly answer Tom's question yet, I apologize, but I do want to share one of the very valid questions raised by one of our banker colleagues. She asked, if the returns on energy efficiency projects are so convincing, why isn't it apparent? And it's good to compare it to what we see in solar projects. Solar developers have been very good already with showing what bankers need. You need to know the cash flows, the returns, the risk, the sensitivity analysis, and all that. And it's easy for bankers to make a decision, you know, sans the need to make all of these securitization and risk sharing contractual agreements. But when you talk to ESCOs who do these projects, they can tell you very specific technical details on what equipment you need, the specs and all that, but they don't, well, at least for most ESCOs, they're yet to have that capability to show what bankers are looking for. So aside from the need for the banking sector to have capacity building on the technical side, there's also capacity building needed by the ESCO industry on the financial side.
Yeah, and I think that combined with the previous comment, and even combined with what the table here is saying, is really about how we understand and how we communicate these opportunities and these benefits in a way that makes sense, so that we can actually start to cut through and break through. So this is all about you know, the sort of awareness that we need to raise, not just saying we need awareness raising, but we need to be specific. What is it that people need to know and hear? How do we get developers understanding the language of finance and vice versa?
Mark, this is Tom. Can I interject
Tom,
something? Only because it's very related to that particular point. It was something that was raised in our 3-country study, and it comes up in spades, and it came out as one of the major barriers of them not getting bankable projects. And that's the gap in the marketplace for technical capacity to develop bankable projects. And that's what the big difference is what the gentleman was just saying. They're not really seeing ESCOs being able to develop the projects, and that's the need for the training, the certified IG8 SIGAs and all of that stuff. So that's a very absolute gap that goes beyond just what the bankers capacity building. It's the overall technical market development is a huge gap. And I think personally, that's one of the biggest gaps in the marketplace.
Yeah, Also agree, Tom. Thanks. Good effort for hanging in there online all this time as well, and good to have you. Yeah, absolutely. I spoke only very briefly about measurement and verification techniques and having people who can do that, that we try and promote through Evo, but huge gap, you know, not actually being able to appeal to the risk or de-risking that banks need to be able to accept these kind of projects. We are a little bit over time, and so I want to finish up to make sure we have a break and stay fresh, because there's one very important session to go in our day today around the solutions, around what solutions you'd like to see. So let's get creative about that. Let's hear from this table what you discussed, and we can hear, I suppose, a good summary then from everybody on the situation that we're in and the situations that you face in the banking sector. Go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. I think we've heard a lot of issues and comments from the other bankers. So just to add, from our bank, we've been in a journey in establishing our ESRMS framework as well. So part of that is also coming up with a sustainability finance framework. So and I think the table and Alex correctly pointed out that the focus has been more on the sexy projects. So we're looking at the solar, wind, the supercritical technologies. So those are like the sexy ones. But in terms of EE, I think that's where we haven't really touched base much on it. Actually, when I woke up this morning, I have never heard of an ESCO. So thank you very much for this session. It's very useful. In terms of the challenges, I think that I'm a typical banker as well. So my lack of knowledge is basically, I guess, one of the main issues that we have in terms of EE development, because we're looking at, you know, the really, you know, the deals that are getting into front of the papers, but this simple, well, I'm not sure if it's really simple, but it's something that might be a bit more doable in a sense, as what was raised earlier. Why build first when you can shave off the usage? So that's quite so sounds intuitive, but I guess we've missed that. I guess that's where we are right now.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I hope you've got something out of the session and learned something on some of these things that you know, people like Alex and me have heard for a long time, and you know, the opportunities that are there. I guess I'm going to ask you the same thing I asked the table over there. What was the most convincing argument for energy efficiency that you heard today? What would be the thing that would help to progress the argument internally within your bank that this is an important area for focus and further lending?
I guess the thing that would push it is really having that conversation to begin with, because we have not had that conversation, or it hasn't been brought up in the first place.
Yeah, okay, well, that's interesting. And it sounds like a role for ETP and others to think about bringing together conversations exactly like this to make sure that this issue bubbles to the surface. So, Serpa, you have a comment?
Yeah, sort of. I guess it's some provocations in my mind as you all are speaking. I just wonder, okay, the story for me went like this. And when I think about it, like my career in development banking, when I think about what you are saying, I'm wondering, what is the role of competition here? I mean, banking is typically kind of a cutthroat industry. So when the competitor makes a lot of money, the neighboring bank should be looking at what are they doing, right? So I remember in 1999 when ADB received or saw that World Bank started to look at poverty agenda, when ADB had done only Asian dams and bridges, suddenly lots of engineers disappeared, and in came a lot of sort of socioeconomic specialists, and us economists turned into poverty specialists overnight, basically, you know, to respond to this challenge. So I'm wondering, like, yes, I hear you on the awareness, and there is a whole list of certifications available in the global arena. It would be very easy for ETP to subsidize them to be hosted by AIM or somebody. But what is the role of the sort of rate of return? I guess I go back to that and the competition. Maybe Mark, you have some answers on that. Like, how did it happen in other markets in Europe and all that? I'm sure that it did not start from awareness building and all this schooling, but somebody actually doing it and making a buck at it.
Must be talking too much. The microphone's going flat. It's a really good question, Serpa, and it's not an easy one to answer. We talk in terms of everything, why energy efficiency doesn't accelerate or go further. It's because of what we say non-price barriers, right? So the economics of the project stacks up. This should be a good return. In fact, it's more than a good return. A lot of these projects will pay for themselves. We talk in terms of payback in, say, less than 3 years. That's a 33% rate of return. That's very good rate of return on us, like compared to a lot of other investments. We don't have a problem with the rate of return or the incentives, but somehow in most markets, concessional finance that increases the rate of return even further has been effective, right? Because there's a perception, and what that tells you is there's a difference between the perception and the reality. There's a perception that these projects are risky or hard to understand or difficult or too small to worry about. And so it's true that even corporate sort of facility owners who are looking to upgrade facilities, not even looking for bank finance, but using their own capital, will only invest to things which have a 30, 40, 50% IRR, right? They could actually profitably invest in a lot more opportunities, but they don't because of that perceived difficulty of doing that. So it's about, so yeah, to answer your question, I think incentives and concessional finance and these kinds of cheaper money actually have been effective, despite the fact that there shouldn't really be any barriers there, but that is actually something that is a part of the mix, an important part of the mix, even though it doesn't necessarily address the core of the problem. So it's a tricky one to get all of these things working together. You do need, as we've said, multiple different approaches across awareness, across potentially incentives and concessions, across a sort of a push from regulation. And I think it's been a pretty interesting summary from everybody there. We do have to call a halt to the discussion so we can have a break and regroup, but I would encourage you all to chat in the break. We'll have about 20 minutes of time to get a coffee, stay fresh for the last session, which is really to start being creative and thinking about, if we were going to support the industry, what sort of solutions would you like to see? What can we really take forward as a first priority from this discussion today? So thank you all for participating in that. It's been really great. We'll capture all that information and take it forward. So we'll come back in about 20 minutes at 3:35. Okay, thank you all. If you feel the last session wasn't quite enough time to get all of your views across, I hope we'll have some more time now. And this is our chance to start to think creatively about what you would like to see, what could be done, what mechanisms might be needed of all the things you've talked about today and all the options that there are. So we're talking about solutions and support for your industry, for energy efficiency financing in general. And to kick us off with some thoughts and some discussion, I'm going to ask our hosts, and it's John Cotton, who's the Deputy Director, I think, of the Southeast Asia Energy Transition Partnership, to tell us a little bit about some of the things that ETP is doing to support financing for energy efficiency, as well as maybe introducing you a little bit more to the organization and what it does, as a thought starter for all of you thinking more about the solutions that you would like to see and the support that you would like to have. So John, thanks very much. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Thank you for the promotion as well. I'm not the deputy director, the senior program manager, but I'll take the promotion if you're offering it. Thank you.
I don't think it's mine to offer, but anyway.
Okay, hi, good afternoon, everybody. I really enjoyed the last session. Getting to speak to people in person has really brought the day to life. And the reason why we organize this is to learn from the financial institutions. We hope to share international experience, but more, as it was just pointed out to me, really everything has to be tailored for the Philippines to meet the needs and the goals of the Philippines. So that's what we're hoping to achieve today. So just very briefly, I'd like to introduce a little bit more about the Energy Transition Partnership. Sirpa gave an introduction at the beginning, so I won't reiterate this. We are a multi-donor, multi-country platform. In short, this means we are funded by various philanthropies and governments. This makes us quite unique. The philanthropies and governments have come together with a single aim, which is to support energy transition in Southeast Asia, namely Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam. So next slide, please. And the next slide, please. So we work in 4 areas. We work in aligning energy efficiency and renewable energy policies with climate commitments. What this means is, as countries in the region are increasing their climate commitments, namely through the NDCs, we support the governments in ensuring that the policies come in line with these commitments so that the NDCs can be met. We also work on de-risking EE and RE investments, which is what we're doing today. We're talking about this. We expand sustainable resilient infrastructure, so this is smart grids, and we work on capacity building. Maybe I think it's worth, here we have EE/RE. I've noticed in discussions today that there's perhaps some confusion in the difference between EE and RE. EE, energy efficiency, the theme of today's discussion, and RE, renewable energy. When I've had conversations about what the financial institutions are doing in energy efficiency, I think most of the answers I've got are what the banks are doing in renewable energy, and there's quite a big difference. So renewable energy is putting solar and wind onto the grid to increase the amount of power in the network. Energy efficiency is using energy more wisely, more efficiently. So for every kilowatt of hour produced, we create more work, we do more with this. So one example I was given was a reason the financial institutions aren't necessarily focused on energy efficiency is because they're focused more on, let's say, dealing with the brownouts, which is putting more power into the grid. Actually, energy efficiency is the solution to the brownouts. It's quicker, cheaper, and easier than putting new energy into the grid. So if we take Europe as an example today, with the conflict with Ukraine and Russia, there's energy security issue taking place in Europe, maybe unprecedented, the size of energy security issue. The immediate response from Europe, because it's the only thing that they can do in such a short space of time, they rolled out a 10-point plan. This 10-point plan is based entirely in energy efficiency. They've come forth and said, basically, we need to use our energy more wisely, otherwise we're going to be very, very cold this winter. So energy efficiency is 100% top of the agenda. So for us at the ETP, we've been working in energy efficiency since our formation, because we see that the pathway to net zero is cheaper, quicker, and easier with energy efficiency, and hence the focus we put on this. Wind, solar, this is all in the pipeline and will come. But energy efficiency is immediate, and from the financial institutions, it's a market that is growing globally and can be benefited from right now. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So just very quickly, Energy Transition Partnership, or ETP, is working in Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam, and we work across various areas. I won't go through all of this, but we're working in coal phase down in Indonesia and Vietnam. We're working on carbon markets here in the Philippines and in Vietnam also. We have regional programs on just transition, energy efficiency, regional connectivity. So just on this one, I'll link up energy efficiency with just transition. So as I mentioned before, energy efficiency is particularly interesting to just transition. Just transition is, if you're not familiar with this term, as we look at changing society, phasing out coal, closing down coal mines and coal plants, there's going to be people who are potentially left behind, who lose their livelihood. Everybody from the person who sells noodles to the coal miners, right the way through to the asset owners. There's going to be areas of society that need to change their livelihoods. Just transition is finding a economical, sustainable, healthy work for these people and their families. And energy efficiency has the potential to play a very important role in the just transition, because maybe unlike other areas of energy sector, energy efficiency creates so many jobs. It is creating an entire new society of work. Construction industry will boom. The electricians, electrical engineers, there's so many people involved in the supply chain of energy efficiency that we see this as an important component to bring in to make sure that the energy transition is just. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so next slide, please. So I've gone a little bit off script here, basing what I'm saying on the discussions I've had today. So the Energy Efficiency Innovation Window is one of the activities ETP have conducted in energy efficiency. So I think more useful question is why UNOPS with Energy Transition Partnership focusing on energy efficiency. So our goal is to expedite the energy transition. That is, reduce greenhouse gases in as quick a time as possible. It's quicker, easier, and cheaper with energy efficiency. And why are we doing this? Why are we reducing greenhouse gases? Okay, so this is to do with climate change. The Philippines in particular is incredibly vulnerable to climate change. We're seeing in Europe now, there's forest fires, there's droughts. The effects of climate change are here now, today. And the Philippines is one of the most vulnerable countries on the planet to climate change. So there's a lot of other agencies and people working here in the adaptation. So building up capacities for the Philippines to deal with the future effects of climate change. Our role is not here, it's on reducing the greenhouse gases here and now. And actually, so I'll bring it back to energy efficiency. It's a one part of energy transition I can speak to my children about at the dinner table because I understand it. It's difficult for them to understand when I talk about the complexity of integrating variable renewable energies into the grid. This is challenging. However, they understand that if you turn off the lights and reduce the air conditioning, if we don't have it so freezing cold, we reduce our energy, we produce less greenhouse gases, and the future for them is likely going to be better if we do that. So it's a very easy one to sell to my children. And my wife, she's really into it. She wants to start a business in energy efficiency now. I'm so excited about the potential role energy efficiency can play and how really easy it is actually. It sounds complex when we look at the financial models, it's off balance sheets. It's really quite simple. We use less energy or we use energy more wisely to get more output. It's quite simple. So ETP support this. We launched the energy efficiency window. In the energy efficiency window is a $1.5 million grant fund where we invited private sector and others to submit an application to us of which we'd evaluate, and we would award grant funding to conduct their projects. And we based the evaluation on the project development support, i.e. will it see a tangible project at the end? Will we see a demonstration of energy efficiency in action? Will it allow access to energy efficiency finance either for themselves or for people to follow? And will it facilitate policy implementation? Will it have a long-lasting effect within a country? And I'm pleased to say we had many, many very good applicants to this. And so far we've awarded 6 grants totaling $1.5 million. I'll just touch on them very, very briefly. So CPI in Indonesia, they will develop a credit guarantee mechanism, which will allow the sale of a particular type of product called with the brand Danfoss. IIEE, Indonesian Institute of Energy Efficiency. This is a very beautiful project which was low cost and highly effective, basically working with school children in Indonesia to raise awareness about energy efficiency. It reminds me of my youth when people came into our schools and told us not to throw garbage on the floor. At this time, there was a lot of garbage on the floor in the UK. After this campaign, nobody throws garbage on the floor. My generation was one who said, Mum and Dad, you can't throw things out the car window. I really saw the effects in Indonesia just in a 3-month course of the children. They're singing songs about turning off air conditioners, turning off the lights. It's me telling my kids in the house, turn the lights off when you, well, it's actually my wife telling me because I'm not so good at this, but my wife's telling John, turn off the lights, turn off the aircon. the children are now telling their parents to do it. And this is the mindset we need to create for the next generation. So this is a great little project. PE Enitech are working on an energy savings insurance model and a pilot scheme. And then in the Philippines, we have Climagy, who we've already heard from, working on IGAs, and EP Group, also in the Philippines, working on an ESCO in the box model. I think very interesting for the financial institutions. I think it'd be very useful for us to introduce you. They are preparing basically an out-of-the-box set of contracts for all the various stages of the ESCO model. So quite an interesting concept there. And the final one is South Pole, working in Thailand, Indonesia, and Vietnam. They are incubating EV-based projects, more or less. So that's what we're doing on energy efficiency. So our journey, we saw on an earlier slide, there's energy users, government, ESCOs, and financiers all working together in energy efficiency. At ETP, we're working closely with the governments. We're working closely with the ESCOs. We are promoting in the energy user space, and it's the financiers that we are looking to work with now. So I think Mark will have 3 questions at the end of this, where we ask the financial institutions to help guide, or as we have some grant funding, the governments and philanthropies want to support Philippines in their energy efficiency journey, and we can help facilitate this. So we're looking forward to your feedback, your thoughts for your own programs of how we can support you. So thank you very, very much for coming today. We're getting a lot out of this. We really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Fantastic introduction and overview of what ETP is doing. A real supporter of energy efficiency in the region, and one that's interested in supporting more. So we're now at the pointy end of our discussion, which is about you guys thinking, how can ETP help? How can an organization like ETP come and provide more support to the sorts of things that you need to do? We have one more quick discussion starter from someone who's patiently on the line and I think was planning to be here in person, but is not feeling so well today, Mr. Noel Verdote. Noel, it's good to see you.
Hi, good to see you, Mark.
Thanks for joining. And
yeah, I've been here the whole day. Very interesting, in fact.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad that that you've managed, and I'm sorry that you couldn't be here in person. But anyway, we're setting the scene now for the last discussion on the sort of support that can be provided to the industry. Tell us a little bit, Noel, about your current role working with USAID and the Energy Secure Philippines activity as a way of framing this and letting people understand what you're doing to support energy efficiency financing. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. On behalf of Energy Secure Philippines, I'd like to thank the organizers for this opportunity. If I may just share my screen. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. You can go into full presentation.
Okay. So just to introduce briefly the project, what we're doing, I'd like to show you the clip.
I think we don't hear the sounds, Noel. I don't know if you have to.
Hello.
Hi, Noel. Yeah,
Yes.
can you please reshare the presentation and take the button that says share computer sound?
Sure. Sorry. Yeah. Earlier I tested it. It was okay. Anyway, let me scroll it back.
It's
Is it
working
now?
now.
Yeah,
Newest
thank you.
energy program, the Energy Secure Philippines, aims to enhance energy security and reliability of an envisioned unified power system. To achieve these goals, the $34 million USAID ESP activity will contribute 500 additional megawatts in generation capacity and mobilize private investments equivalent to $750 million. ESP includes a grants mechanism amounting to $7.5 million stakeholders to effectively implement the activity. While ESP has a national geographic focus, it will also work with selected cities under the cities development initiatives such as Batangas, Tagbilaran, and General Santos. ESP will also work with different special economic zones in Subic, Clark, and Cavite. ESP activity is implemented by a consortium led by RTI International with support from subcontractors Wise Energy, Full Advantage Philippines Incorporated, Benwood Corporation, the Philippine League of Local Environment and Natural Resources Officers Incorporated, Chessie Enernex, and Vitol LLC. The ESP activity builds upon USAID's strong partnership with the Department of Energy and Energy Regulatory Commission, as well as with different local government units through various technical assistance efforts in paving the way for the country's journey to self-reliance. This 5-year flagship energy program is anchored on 6 major pillars. Energy security. ESP will introduce methodologies and support policies to improve the operations of power utilities to secure energy resources in the country. Energy resilience. The Philippines remains vulnerable from climate change effects. In addition, the recent COVID-19 pandemic underscored the need to strengthen resilience planning. ESP activity will promote risk vulnerability assessments to support the country's energy systems against natural disasters and crises. ESP will also focus on developing cybersecurity assessment framework and institute international standards to counter cybersecurity threats across the country's power grid. With the help of a customized capacity building program, ESP will equip energy stakeholders with skills to utilize new and emerging technology innovations for sustained private sector engagements. Finally, ESP will enhance competition in the power sector by supporting the government's trust and exercise the power of choice under the expanded coverage of retail competition and open access. Together with the government of the Philippines, the private sector, and various stakeholders, USAID, through its ESP activity, is committed to build an enhanced, reliable, and secure power grid, gearing towards an energy-secure Philippines.
Okay, so at a snapshot, this is what the project's all about, and I'd like to focus on the grant program. So this is not a typical grant, a dole out, but it's a grant under contract, meaning whoever responds to the call for proposals is committed to do what it outlined to do in its proposal. And we cater not to the government, but to the private sector, universities, CSOs, and the like. You've heard about the different objectives and what we hope to achieve. Additional generation capacity of 500 megawatt and 750 megawatt private sector investments. And we have 7.5 million US dollar grants cutting across the 3 objectives. So the USAID activity is called the Energy Evolution Challenge. And what we're looking for are projects that are catalytic, innovative, replicable, scalable, sustainable energy solutions. And this can be an array of both EERE, energy access, generation, microgrid, platform-based services, productive uses of energy, and many others, or a combination thereof. And to date, we've awarded a number of grants. We have 4. We rolled out again the first 3 grants here shown for portable energy solutions for logistics chain of essential goods. The second one is innovative energy systems in fish and agro-processing industries. And the third one, a topic which was talked about, is ESCOLED energy efficiency and conservation in local government units. Okay, and the fourth one is the development of regional energy knowledge hubs. So this is in support of the, if you know, the law passed on PERPI, or the policy on Philippine Energy Research Policy Institute, something. So on the agro-processing industry, I just want to cite this example because this is a project on an off-grid island with no access to electricity, and it's not viable to connect it via grid. And I like this example because this shows we're not only considering here the demand side, but also the supply side of things. So it's the pure seed, meaning the productive use of renewable energy, sustainable energy environment project. So the conventional approach is you've heard quite a lot about this, put up solar PVs and provide basic electrical services for lighting, appliances, and so on. But for this one, they are, in order to avoid all of those bureaucratic process, they are selling the services, okay? They make use of the electricity to make ice out of it, and they treat water for sale to the residents, and they do have solar array, solar drying for the fish and the seaweeds, which actually add value to it, prolongs the life of those products, and the shared service facility actually maximize the profit and at the same time reduce overfishing and preserve marine environment. And we cannot, discount all these benefits that they are now looking at. Now, I'd like to point out that one innovative technology that was used here, which was also talked about earlier, is the digital platform, use of the VSAT in order to monitor the energy generation, its uses on the services that I mentioned, and the billing to clients. So I won't go through all of these benefits, but I've heard a lot of discussion on energy is something which we cannot comprehend, cannot understand, right? Because primarily energy efficiency is a characteristic of technology, material, or design, and we cannot buy it. Unlike asset-based renewable energy, which most of you have described as sexy. But we can buy a more efficient air conditioner or the inverter, LED, and the like in order to be more energy efficient. And one of the questions that was raised earlier by Mark is, what is the compelling reason why you should sell energy efficiency financing to the bank? I think Mike Magpusa have shown that the Philippines has the highest electricity rate. And as was pointed out by our first speaker in this session, whatever kilowatt hour you save would benefit not only our pockets, but also the environment. Okay, and it's the cheapest, cleanest source of energy. And who are our clients in energy efficiency financing for you bankers? Are these new clients or existing clients? If you go for the RE developers, these are mostly new clients. And you have to go through all the process of doing due diligence, KYCs, and do the risk analysis and so on and so forth for the project, and also during implementation and post-implementation. Whereas if you're financing energy efficiency, your clients are your existing customers, okay? And that you already know this existing set of customers, and you're simply adding value to your clients, making them realize savings that will sustain their business, and them as well being loyal to you, and you adding the stickiness to your relationship with your clients. So that's the big difference. And while renewable energy, the payback is renewable energy is normally project finance, because the prepayment is out of the energy that is sold, the revenue out of it. for energy efficiency, it's out of savings. So as Mark pointed out earlier, normally 2 to 3 years, and it's a less risky. Now, I'd like to go to the next slide, going back to energy efficiency and energy efficiency financing. All of us are already paying for efficiency projects, whether or not we do the projects. Why? Because we're paying for inefficiencies. So why not invest in energy efficiency and enjoy the benefit? The lower electricity cost. Let's forget about the bigger picture, externalities and so on. So let's just think about this. One of you pointed out that if at the household level, you're able to, relate easily to purchasing inverter air cons, why can't you not do the same pitch to your clients? As I've said, your clients for EE are normally your existing clients whom you already know. It's just a matter of asking you, hey, how old is your equipment? If it is 5 years, then it's already qualified for replacement, as was pointed out by Alex. Why wait for the time when it breaks down? Okay, your clients would suffer more disruptions. So the natural course of technology is already energy efficient, changing light bulbs, air conditioning, and so on and so forth. But I'd like to point out as well that there are limits to efficiency, such that if you don't change the process or the system, which our speaker from INGIE mentioned, for example, district cooling, then you can no longer drive down efficiency improvements. If you may recall earlier, the chart that was presented by Mike Magpusaw shows that over the years, EPMC properties have lower kilowatt hour per square meter per year compared to ASEAN and international standards. But there's a limit to it. You can no longer drive energy efficiency beyond a certain limit, and you have to change the process. And that's where the big ticket items comes in. This was discussed by Alex: district cooling, district heating, waste heat recovery, and many things. But who are your clients? As I've said time and again, it is your existing clients whom you already know, and you're just adding value to your services. Now, I mentioned also about the natural course of technology, which is already energy efficient. Most of you have said that you are at the early stages of doing energy efficiency financing. I don't believe that, because if you're financing equipment replacement, you're already into the business of energy efficiency financing. If you have a subsidiary, a lending, leasing equipment, that's already energy efficiency financing. You just have to put it in another basket. And one of you was talking about, there's no meeting of minds between central bank and the DOE. DOE being very aggressive, paving the way for the energy efficiency and conservation to be practiced by everyone across all the sectors. You may have forgotten that Ms. Lynn Javier, the Deputy Governor of BSP, mentioned about the forthcoming circular, which will now enable the banks, to count energy efficiency project financed as part of your Agri-Agra contribution or financing. So meaning, instead of the banks paying penalties every year because you don't comply with the Agri-Agra, why not open a window, a facility specifically catered to energy efficiency? And that alone will already be giving returns to the bank. If I may, I recall a question by Sirpa, if I'm not mistaken, about the energy efficiency financing should drive competition. Well, local banks, when I was in IFC, International Finance Corporation, managing the sustainable energy finance here, many of them think that because the big top 2 clients or top 2 banks are already into that space, there's no more opportunity for them. to finance energy efficiency. No, you've seen the opportunity. There's huge opportunity to finance renewable energy. And I think I'll stop there, Mark. I'd like to thank you, and I hope I was able to catalyze more ideas from the participants. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Noel. Thanks very much for your presentation and for sticking with us all day. I very much like the way that you managed to weave into your remarks some of the things that some of our speakers have been saying during the day. Very helpful and interesting work that you're doing with the Energy Secure Philippines project with USAID. Thank you for sharing all of that and, as I say, being with us. So, right
by the way,
now-
Mark, sorry,
Yes?
I forgot one other thing. The fit of energy efficiency financing to the bank strategy is one. The other one is incentives. Incentives not only coming from external, but incentives to the account officers. Are they being paid or incentivized because of volume, because of the size number of projects? Or should they be incentivized? Should there be another KRA, key result area, on projects that are related to the environment? Thank you.
Yeah, good point. And we've talked a little bit about incentives already, but those incentives going all the way through the organization. I also liked what you said, Noah, about the fact that actually, maybe you think you're not involved in energy efficiency lending, but you are. If you're lending for equipment, whether it's leases or whatever it is, that you have the opportunity there to think about additional savings and additional benefits from efficient equipment versus non-efficient equipment. Thank you very much, Noah. We have to move on to our discussion. And this discussion is building on what we've just heard from both ETP and USAID there in terms of support for energy efficiency financing, support for the sector. So this is now your chance to think about this very specifically, this question of what is it that you would like to see done? What is it that you would like to see as new support to energy efficiency financing? So could there be new mechanisms? Could there be additional support to the kind of mechanisms that that we're hearing about here from USAID and from ETP? Can we build on the existing mechanisms or create new ones? What is it that you would like to see? And you should think big. What is it that everything you've heard today seems to you to be the most attractive solution or possible solution? So this is my first question of my 3 questions for our last session. The second one is, who are the stakeholders that you need to see at the table for this initiative? Who should this initiative be developed with? And who is actually essential to be part of this? If it's going to work, do we need to have certain organizations at the table? Do we need to have certain sectors represented? Do we need to have those views incorporated into the design of these mechanisms? And the third one is a direct question, and in a way getting to the heart of what we're asking today. How can ETP help in this process? How can ETP support the industry and tackle the challenges that you're facing to accelerate energy efficiency financing? So they're the 3 questions for this round. As before, it's our session before the break, I'll give you an opportunity to discuss these, and then we'll report and have a discussion on that to finish up today. And I hope you'll go away with the feeling that not only you learned something, but you had the opportunity to contribute something that will be taken forward from here to further work to support you. So please go ahead in your groups and discuss this. We'll take about 20 or so minutes like last time and come back for a report out. Thank you. just a point of clarification. When we're saying, what are the new energy efficiency financing mechanisms? This can be anything that you've seen today and heard today that you want to know more about, that you think this could work. And we've put a number of the opportunities on the table. We heard about concessional finance. We have things like credit lines that maybe we could have, maybe a dedicated energy efficiency financing facility that could be put into place that would help banks to lend more. We can think about guarantees or partial guarantees. These sorts of mechanisms, it can be anything, right? Other things we've talked about, like a model for supporting the ESCOs, or maybe the super ESCO model. What are the things that you think can work? And what are the things that you would like to see put in place that would unlock the opportunity for your institution? That's really what we're asking with that question. Okay, well, I hope we're wrapping up the discussions, and we're going to move now to the last round of answers from each of the tables. I think our conversation groups have shrunk. We only have maybe 3 conversations going now. I'm going to check in with each of you about this question. We have about 15 minutes or so to go through some answers in terms of what you've been discussing on these questions. Some discussion still going, but I think we have, just let me check that we have a table to report at the back. We have one here. We have one here. I think our other discussion groups have reduced a little bit. But you have something that you want to add? Okay, so we'll take about 15 to 20 minutes and just report out on the discussions that we've had, what it is that you would like to see, what it is that you have as advice or inputs for ETP as they go ahead to think about further support for the industry, the sorts of things that are needed, and who needs to be involved in these programs. So we have a small group here, just 2, but hopefully they're talkative and they can report on thoughts on these questions. Would you like to go ahead? Thank you.
Good afternoon. On the first question, we thought that the Department of Energy and the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas should lead. And if there are also guarantee supports that are available for this type, then that would also be welcome. For number 2, what are the key enabling stakeholders? Who are the key enabling stakeholders? We thought that since for FIs were generally ruled by the Bangko Sentral, then we would welcome anything applicable to what Lynn Javier said earlier on the 1085 circular as well as the 1137. And on the third, how can ETP support then? We would appreciate any capacity diet on the bank efficiency to understand what the mechanics are on the guidance. So if this would be ideal for us to answer the 3 questions.
Okay, thanks. Can I just come back to the first one? You mentioned a sort of connection between BSP and DOE.
Yes, because he's familiar with how the DOE has been dealing with the company that he manages, and it seems that they're far ahead in terms of supporting energy efficiency in the Philippines.
Okay, so this point about coordination, I guess intergovernmental coordination between different pieces of the puzzle, so that you feel that is that's not there or it needs to be changed. Can you just maybe elaborate a little bit on what you would like to see change?
We will welcome any enhancements because on the 1085, BSP Circular 10 and 1085, it just requires banks in general, because we're not listed or a commercial bank, to put in our annual report 2 years later what our initiatives are regarding ESG. And the 1137 that Lynn was talking about this morning was just on the stress testing. So it's still relatively voluntary, while the DOE seems to be more explicit with the mechanics of how they deal with the companies that look at energy efficiency.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I think it's an interesting question to think about all the different factors and market conditions and pressures that banks are under. So the regulatory pressures, but there's also market pressure in various ways, right? I mean, you have even to think about the risk of your assets themselves from climate change, to think about the other activities that you're undertaking in the ESG space, to bring all those together, including the imperative to try and reduce your own footprint, your own, for the sake of your own positioning in the market. All these things are important pressures and maybe something that helps to crystallize the opportunity of energy efficiency in the minds of bank management as well. So yeah, thank you very much. That's a great input.
I'd like to add something.
Yes, go ahead.
In terms of financing mechanism, when renewable energy came onto the agenda here in a mainstream way, we had a feed-in tariff, which basically subsidized renewable energy. Now we've got to find some, risk mitigating measures to help energy efficiency. And one of those financing mechanisms I would like to see is a guarantee to help deviate that risk from the banks, but also the end users as well. It's all about a learning process. And in that learning process, we will make mistakes. So if we can help cover up those mistakes or see us through, then that would be helpful.
Can I ask who ideally would you like to see this guarantee provided by?
It'd have to be a government entity. Which one?
Could be a development financier. Just
it could.
Okay, we're not fussy. We just would like to see one. That's fine. Good input. Thanks very much and very helpful. Is there a discussion from this table? No, we're okay. We're almost at the end of our program. This is your moment to tell us what you'd like to see in the way of support. I don't know that we can take the same. You did such a good job last time. I think it's, we don't want to put too much pressure on one person at the table. So I'm going to nominate somebody else. You're closest to me, so maybe is it okay? You can report for the table.
Okay. For the first question, the primary objective of the banks is to mitigate the risk. So how can we mitigate it? We discussed here that there's a need, given that this is a relatively new industry for us, there's a need for us to be comfortable by having an insurance. And given that there's no energy efficiency insurance available in the market here in the Philippines, we have to engage partnership with offshore insurance companies. And also, we also recommended, we ask actually if there's a technical advisor, expert in this field, because that will make ourselves comfortable given that this is a new industry and we're unaware of this energy efficiency projects. So we will be needing a report from a technical advisor to make us comfortable. As to the number 2 question, there's really a need for a push from our central bank, which gives policies for us banks. Same with what's happening in the ESG. Last year, all the banks have implemented the ESG framework because there's a push from central bank. So if we will be given, the banks will be given incentives, or there's a limit for us to accomplish, that will really give a push to our top management and then to our risk and eventually our relationship managers to really go after accounts that is engaged in energy efficiency. And then number 3, how can ETP support the industry? Well, I believe the technical advisor aspect for the number 3, given that you're the experts here, it's how you can support us for us to be more comfortable in this one.
So you want us to stay and work with you and give you technical advice. That's fine. Thank you very much. I'm sorry to put you right on the spot there. In fact, I really like that you talked about risk and the need to think about risk, because actually I think this is one of the first things that banks are going to think about. They don't care about the energy efficiency or the rest. They're looking at particularly the project financials. They're looking at the risk in terms of, are we going to end up with a bad debt that reflects badly on the portfolio and reflects badly on shareholder value and all of those things. So this question of how to assess the risk, and you mentioned insurance, which we've talked about today a little bit, and it is very much a product that is available in some countries. So looking at it and saying, how do you mitigate risk? You take insurance, right? But that insurance and the understanding of the insurance sector in being able to offer that is still lacking, right? So not many people are offering energy efficiency insurance because most insurance companies don't understand the risk that they're covering. So we still come back to the same question about defining and understanding performance risk for energy saving projects, which is where, you know, with my other hat to talk about efficiency valuation organization, we have a protocol, we have understood methodology for doing that, right? So insurance companies need to understand that as well before they can offer that insurance. So it comes back to that as being really an important skill that's needed in the market, either for your own credit officers and risk officers, or for an insurance provider to understand those questions of risk. Good. I'm coming now to this table. We have 2 more tables to report out with, again, answers to this question. What would you like to see? How do you think we could move forward? How can we accelerate things? And how can ETP and other organizations wishing to assist the industry, how can they help? So I'm looking for a reporter from this table. Do we have any volunteer? You're already safe because you reported last time. It's all quiet. Who would like to put their hand up, or should I go to this table first while you decide? Okay, I'm coming back to you. You can decide between yourselves to report out, but we're nearly finished here. We just have a couple more discussions to report upon, so we can capture everything that you've talked about and discussed in this meeting, in this session this afternoon. Who would like to report for your table? Please. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so I think in our table, a lot of the conversations that we had were kind of on the existing financing products that we had in our banks, and if this was something that could already be used to kind of accommodate the EE financing. And we did look a lot on the project finance aspect. We believe that I think the project finance is something that can be done, especially in the case of an aggregator, because normally with project finance, it needs to be a bit more large scale. We did ask about Alex about the typical ticket size, which comes out on an ESCO basis of about $500,000 US. So from a PF perspective, that seems a little bit small, but if you do it on an aggregator level, then PF does make sense. But there was also a really interesting discussion on how there could be a PPP angle to this, where if you have somebody who does an unsolicited proposal to the government to do like a consolidated like district cooling, for example, and then tap the banks and the lenders, because in that case it becomes scale. So you're using an existing framework, but for EE financing. So that's kind of where we were coming at. And so what are the key enabling, or who are the key enabling stakeholders? So obviously you have your lenders, you have your industry, then you have your regulators, and then you have insurance, technical advisors, everything that's all of the relevant parties in your project finance. And I guess knowing that these are the stakeholders that need to be engaged, and how can ETP support the industry or as a whole, I think personally, I really learned a lot from the session today. And as a lender, that really helps me understand what EE financing is about. But the conversation also needs to happen in all the stakeholders, right? So if ETP can hold similar workshops for all these relevant stakeholders, then the chances of somebody taking that risk, like for example, somebody submitting an unsolicited proposal and then banks being primed to actually finance the project financing for that, and government also understanding what needs to be included in the terms of reference, then that's really, really helpful. So just keep having the conversations. And then I think this is really like something that's going to be a logical next step in the sustainability financing framework of all the lenders. Yeah, so there.
Thank you. It's a great comment, and a detailed comment as well. Wow, I'm impressed. And I guess I want to just clarify as well. I mean, it sounds pretty difficult. We have to now engage with all the different people, because we've said it needs all of them to be playing their part in this, and we need to sort of bring all the incentives into alignment and get people focused on a common goal. But I'm interested, you said to use kind of existing structures like that for PPP. And it takes a little bit towards what Noel was saying, that actually you're involved in energy efficiency already, you just don't know it yet, right? To sort of say, well, these projects you can embed energy efficiency. Alex said the same thing. What about we add on this project or this blending that we know how to do for building development or for other asset-backed lending? What about we add there an energy efficiency component? So I think that's really interesting to think about how you could use existing structures of government, use existing structures that the industry understands and works with, and start to embed energy efficiency thinking into those structures as a way to get to this place, right? And also, we talked about in the lunch break, so the possibility of having an entity or a point that people can come together to get information, to get expertise in this. Because as you say, we have to appeal to a lot of different audiences. How will they all find their way to this information unless there's one thing talking about this issue that they can understand and get together around? Thank you. Great comment. Anyone from this table want to report on the discussion? Did you have a fight between yourselves to know who it is? There we are. Thank you.
I wasn't volunteering because we kind of just discussed and then I wasn't taking notes. But anyway, I invite my group mates to pitch in if I forget things. It was we kind of represent different sectors. So for the government, it was mentioned that probably the financing mechanisms would be like in terms of grants, blended financing, concessions, and similar grants in order to fund these energy efficiency projects. And it was also mentioned during our discussion that for the banks, like one of us posed the question that what would it take for the bank to, say, yes, we will consider your energy efficiency project. And we were thinking that like we usually have this like a credit committee doing the evaluations. And so the idea is, of course, the proponent should actually be, pass all the criteria first. And then if you have this environmental things, energy efficiency, then that's nice, that's good. But you have to first be like a qualified borrower. Yeah, like your business isn't crumbling, you should be in good status.
So credit
or-
risk first before.
Yeah. So that's usually the perspective of the bank, and that's like a template. So if you don't meet this criteria, then bye. So that's one thing to consider also. And then yeah, I think and because of this, we also, because I'm coming from the environmental department of our unit, another department or group takes charge of the actual credit or the accounts. So we would suggest, as recommended by the other group, to have the other layers. So perhaps also, at least on our side, we would, if you do give an invitation, we will also extend it to like the credit officers of our bank. So not just because I'm from the environment, she's from the sustainability department of her bank. So just to see also the perspective of these different layers that are present in the financial institution. So that we can give a bigger perspective also in terms of this energy efficiency projects.
Okay, thanks. Can I just pick up on a couple of things there? And maybe this is for anyone to comment, but you mentioned a couple of internal questions or issues that would need to be addressed so you can move forward. And you mentioned some templates and pre-qualification. So you would check against criteria that this borrower is eligible. And maybe one of those criteria could be impact on energy savings, and there could be other criteria built into that. But first and foremost, it's a credit assessment. So you mentioned one that we should try to target not just one part of the bank, but all parts of the bank. I think we've agreed, including senior management, so that these kind of procedures can become codified. That's how banks get good at lending cost effectively on things is that the procedure becomes the same, right? And so the problem with these projects, every single one is different. It's difficult to get the approval through your internal system. My question to you is, how can something like ETP help that process? How can ETP help for you to change those internal procedures and make it easier to lend on energy efficiency? Do you have any thought on that? No thought, but it's the question that I guess we're trying to understand is how much can be helped from external and how much does it have to come from within? So
one of the things that our banker colleagues mentioned earlier, which is not exactly financial mechanism related, but there's a lot of discussion on best practices, sample projects, experiences around the world, but they stress that it has to be localized. It has to be an actual pilot project in the Philippines under local conditions, where we've seen investors actually putting money into these projects, seeing what cash flows are in there. And I think that would help bring banks closer into considering something like this.
Okay, so Alex, you'll get a lot of calls after this, looking at that example of something really working, and also even the kind of work that you heard about from Ayala this morning, even NG talking about the kind of things they're doing. That can be a way for banks to engage with those real issues and start to work out some of those internal questions. Good. Thank you very much. And thanks to everyone for your contributions and inputs in this. You've made it to the end of a long day. We've been talking about this topic since this morning, and I don't think we're really finished or that we solved everything, but we did make a start. So I'm going to sign off from here and give the final word to ETP through Fritzi Verheul, who's the Philippines coordinator, someone that you all should know, as we take this conversation now and try to, round of applause. So she's going to sign off and tell you just the next steps. Before I hand over to Fritzi, I just want to, again, thank you all for your participation today. Really, really helpful and great to take all of the information that you've got. We will take that and process it into the next steps. I want to thank all of our speakers who, in some cases, stayed up late or went to bed early, or the other way around, or got up early, I should say, to bring you what is actually a pretty leading program in terms of expertise from around the world and examples from around the world of how we crack some of these issues on energy efficiency financing. I want to do a special shout out to our technical support person in San Francisco, for whom I think it's about 2 o'clock in the morning now, who's been with us all day. Thank you very much, Eng, in the background. You can flash yourself on the screen to everybody if you would like to. And we've also had Ralph helping in the background. Thank you, Ralph, for just keeping the show rolling. Lastly, to thank ETP and the Bankers Association of the Philippines for bringing you all together here today. I've learned a lot from all of you. I hope you've learned something about this question. And yeah, I hope it's not the last time we talk about this as we move this forward. So that's all from me. Thanks very much. And I'll give Fritzi the last word. Thank you.
Maybe I'll just stay here. So thank you very much, Mark and Ralph. And I'd also like to thank, maybe you see him in emails. Chong is also a big part of this organization. He's part of the ETP Secretariat. And Natida, I'm working from Mark's statement of gratitude, but part of our team is based in Bangkok, and they've been a big help in organizing this with the Bankers Association of the Philippines. So again, I'd like to thank everybody, especially those who have stayed for the entire day, for sharing your time and your ideas, your expertise with us. And I will try to have a short summary of what we discussed within the day. So we tried to look at the opportunities and the challenges on energy efficiency financing in the Philippines. So in the morning, we listened to Director Patrick Aquino. Unfortunately, they were not able to be here, but he outlined different investment opportunities on energy efficiency. And really, he stated different technologies from changing household light bulbs to distributed renewable energy. There was some talk here about some confusion on RE and energy efficiency. But if you look at the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act, solar rooftops is considered as energy efficiency because I guess it reduces demand from the grid. But also there are opportunities on cooling, also on automation, digitalization, which is, I guess, more advanced. So we heard from the building sector. So there's a increasing demand for cooling because, because of economic growth, there's rapid urbanization. And it's getting hotter, especially in the summers in the Philippines. So there's a demand for cooling, efficient cooling. And for the industrial sector, I think Sir Raymond Marquez from EconoServe Solutions, he mentioned MSMEs, small and medium enterprises. So these are probably smaller companies and maybe their energy consumption may not be as large as manufacturing companies, but they make up a majority of our economy. So they also need support. We also heard from the banking sector. Of course, we heard the commitment, especially from Sir Nolly. He said that the banking sector is committed to support the energy efficiency agenda. And we heard from the Assistant Governor Lynn Javier that they are also providing the regulatory push using the ESG framework. And we heard from also the banks that their journey to clean energy financing starts with that ESG requirement. And she mentioned that the energy efficiency projects, renewable energy projects, can actually be used to comply with the AGRA portfolio requirement. So throughout the day, we're trying to build confidence in the ESCO business model. And during the discussions, there's still some confusion what that model is, I think. Just because some banks may be more mature in terms of energy efficiency, but some also is just hearing about this now. So definitely the journey is not homogeneous, and there's a lot of awareness building that needs to be done. We talked about challenges and needs, and that's one of the challenges really, or the needs that the bankers have raised, that you need more awareness, more technical advice. And there's also a need for top management to be informed and to be made aware. So there are some suggestions that maybe we should have something similar like this for top management, maybe an R or two, just so that the push is from top down. We also talked about some misalignments in regulatory push from DOE and DOF, and the need for de-risking instruments to push for energy efficiency. So these discussions today, we will not leave it hanging. We will produce a report and we will share it with you. And we hope that that could be like a roadmap for us, a coordinated roadmap for us to start working together for solutions. We heard that there are different pillars to push for energy efficiency financing, and the finance sector is really an important pillar of that, not just technical. We need awareness, we need end users awareness. So ETP is willing to be that catalyst to work with all stakeholders and really support energy efficiency financing. So again, I reiterate this morning's SERPA's message this morning that we are committed really to work with you, to coordinate and be the catalyst for energy efficiency, to accelerating energy efficiency finance in the Philippines. So again, we thank you for joining us today. We thank the Bankers Association of the Philippines, the Department of Energy, and all of you who have stayed. And we hope that we continue to our engagement together, and we hope to see you in our next and future events. So thank you very much.